Mortal Kombat 11 is coming next month, and the series has never looked more viciously entertaining. So what better way to celebrate than by ranking the main titles in the franchise's gory history? Upgrades, handheld versions of existing games, and updated versions like Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 and Mortal Kombat Gold will not be considered here. So, without further ado, let's get started with the bottom of the barrel. Mortal Kombat Special Forces. Mortal Kombat Special Forces released after Mythologies and somehow turned out worse. The story saw Jax trying to stop Kano and his gang from obtaining an artifact. Yes, that's really it. Combined with awful action, no real gore, and pathetic design, Mortal Kombat Special Forces could only be possible if many members of the development team, including co-creator John Tobias, just up and left, which is exactly what happened. Co-creator Ed Boon would further confirm the various problems plaguing development, even though he didn't work on it either. Mortal Kombat Mythologies Sub-Zero. So what was Tobias' excuse for Mortal Kombat Mythologies Sub-Zero, the side-scrolling action platformer focused on Sub-Zero, tasked with finding an amulet by the mysterious Quan Chi? As a prequel to the first game, Mythology Sub-Zero ended up terrible in every single sense of the word. The graphics looked weird, the controls were dreadful. Imagine pressing a button to turn and change directions. And the difficulty was artificially inflated to a ridiculous measure. Long story short, if Special Forces never came to be, Mortal Kombat Mythology Sub-Zero would easily be the worst game in the franchise. Mortal Kombat 4. After releasing updates, spin-offs, and the retro equivalent of definitive editions for Mortal Kombat 3, Midway finally gave fans what they wanted, a true sequel in Mortal Kombat 4. No animalities and far less comedic elements here. While it was a sequel, Mortal Kombat 4 didn't really improve on previous entries, especially after going fully 3D. The campaign was short, with the story's twists and turns being relatively in terms of engagement. It wasn't a total wash, but the series was starting to look fairly tired by this point. Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe. How do you make a Mortal Kombat game where the gore needs to be severely toned down? The real question in that case would be, why would you? Midway Games' Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe saw heroes like Superman and Batman clashing with Sub-Zero and Scorpion. It had a half-decent story that captured the essence of both properties pretty well. There were also new features like free-fall combat to battle opponents while falling, or the CQC of close combat. An overall odd showing from the series, but Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe is usually considered its own awkward thing more than a true sequel. Mortal Kombat 3. After the straight fire that was Mortal Kombat 2, Mortal Kombat 3 had to be even bigger and better. More gameplay options like combos, animalities, a run button, and mercies. More unlockables, especially two-player mode with the combat code system. New characters like Stryker, Cyrax, Cabal, Shiva, and even more. All of this made Mortal Kombat 3 the biggest game in the series till that point, but not necessarily the most refined. The dark tones were looking suitably less horrific, and several fan favorites like Kitana, Scorpion, and Reptile were straight up missing, though they were added later in Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. Mortal Kombat 3 was a good game, but it signaled a rather telling downturn for the series in the coming years. Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks. Whoa, what's this? A good Mortal Kombat beat-em-up game? Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks was also one of the better titles in the franchise over the years. Starring Liu Kang and Kung Lao, the series' fighting mechanics had flawlessly translated over to the realm of action-adventure. Though balancing for solo players was pretty whack, Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks still remains one of the most solid co-op beat-em-up games out there. Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance. Mortal Kombat needed a shot in the arm, a resurrection of sorts, to get back on its feet, and Deadly Alliance provided just that. The series' darker tone was more deftly captured, as Quan Chi and Shang Tsung teamed up to kill both Shao Kahn and Liu Kang. Fighters now had 3 different styles to choose from, including a weapons-based style for the first time. Running was gone, sidestepping felt more intuitive, and the visuals were heavily improved over Mortal Kombat 4. Old favorites like Johnny Cage, Sub-Zero, Sonya Blade, and Scorpion were also balanced pretty well with new characters like Blaze, Kenshi, and Frost. We even got Conquest, an interesting little side mode which added to the story and provided tutorials for existing characters. Mortal Kombat Deception. So after the positive reception of Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, Mortal Kombat Deception made a slight turn into the bizarre. The story mode sees the forces of good continuing their war against the Deadly Alliance, and the resurrection of Dragon King Onaga, who uses the Kamadogu, 6 artifacts of immense power to decimate his foes. Conquest would have its own dedicated story, focusing on Shujinko. The fighting system from Deadly Alliance was still intact and expanded further with combo breakers, 3 per match. However, it also added weapons and traps to stages, the latter capable of killing players immediately. Then there was puzzle combat, chess combat, and conquest mode being required for treasure keys to use in the crypt. Mortal Kombat Deception was still pretty good, all said and done. Mortal Kombat Armageddon. Look, all you really need to know about Mortal Kombat Armageddon's story is that this was the game that preceded the 2011 reboot, Mortal Kombat. It also had a whopping 62 fighters, but went down to 2 fighting styles for each, and there were plenty of similarities between fighters. Players could create a fighter and create a fatality, but both were criticized, the former for being too limited and the latter for being a poor replacement for character fatalities. But for all of its flaws, Mortal Kombat Armageddon was praised for tightening up the combat and revamping Conquest mode to be more like Shaolin monks. The bizarre minigames would continue though, this time with Motor Combat, a Mario Kart-style spin-off with 10 characters each with unique abilities. Mortal Kombat 10. Conquest mode didn't make a return in Mortal Kombat 10, the series' debut on the current generation of consoles. The X-ray system returned, but players could still use the energy meter to perform powerful special moves and combo breakers depending on how many bars were filled. Aside from the epic storyline, which culminated in Liu Kang and Kitana ruling the Netherrealm while Raiden was corrupted, don't ask, Mortal Kombat 10 was perhaps most notable for its living towers and faction wars system. The latter lets players join specific factions like the Lin Kuei or Special Forces, and fight players from rival factions to unlock different rewards, like faction-specific finishing moves. Mortal Kombat. The first of its kind, introducing an entire generation to violent fighting games, and for many, violent games in general. Mortal Kombat differentiated itself from the competition by featuring digitized characters, allowing for more realistic violence. In terms of gameplay, it introduced a dedicated block button with chip damage being minimal and characters staying rooted in place, thus allowing for better counterplay. Then there's juggling, which involved continuously hitting an enemy in midair. Of course, perhaps the most memorable part of Mortal Kombat was the fatality system, which allowed players to execute deadly finishers on defeated foes, utterly annihilating them after the words "finish him" or "her" appeared. Controversial, gruesome, and an altogether stellar fighting game, Mortal Kombat is simply one of the biggest trendsetters in gaming history. Mortal Kombat 2. Expectations were high from Mortal Kombat 2, but Midway delivered admirably. New fighters like Kitana, Mileena, and Kung Lao joined the roster, expanding the total to 12 fighters. Characters would receive multiple fatalities, and there would be new fatality types like Babality and Friendship. You could even execute opponents using parts of the stage. Mortal Kombat 2 further tightened up its fighting system, making the gameplay faster and combos easier to pull off. It also didn't hurt that the story, which was a big deal in the previous game, evolved further and introduced arguably the most terrifying fighting game boss ever with Shao Kahn. Mortal Kombat 9. Listen, the first Mortal Kombat was pretty revolutionary, and Mortal Kombat 2 was a fantastic follow-up. But Mortal Kombat 9, or just Mortal Kombat, stands out as the best game in the series. It takes us back to where it all began, delivering a classic story that's revitalized with new plot elements, twists, and turns. The ability to play as multiple characters throughout a single campaign would become a staple for NetherRealm's fighting games moving forward. The newly introduced Super Meter allowed for greater variety in terms of special attacks, like an ultra-violent X-ray move that showcased fighters' internal organs and bones being ruptured. Coupled with the excellent visuals, heaps of content like Challenge Tower, minigames like Test Your Might and Test Your Sight, and tight fighting mechanics. Mortal Kombat 9 represents the series' peak. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from GamingBolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.